Welcome everybody to our TVB webinar series. Today our topic is political, and the title of our webinar is How Political Campaigns Can Get the Most Out of Their Advertising Budgets. We have two great panelists today. I'm very glad they're on board. David Heller, who's the president of Main Street Communications, and Brian Baker, the president and general counsel for Ending Spending. For those of you who may not be familiar with Dave is one of the top political media consultants and campaign strategists in the Democratic Party. As president of Main Street Communication, he has compiled one of the best won-loss records in the Democratic Party, helping clients win elections to Congress. In fact, in 2014, while Democrats were losing seats nationally, Dave's clients won 8 out of 10 races. He's a frequent contributor to both MSNBC and Fox News. So Dave, thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Next to Dave is Brian Baker. Brian serves as the president and general counsel of Ending Spending. Brian has been involved in politics for nearly 20 years and has advised numerous elected officials and candidates for federal and statewide office, including Senators Bob Dole and Richard Shelby. He served as a judicial law clerk to Judge Lawrence M. Basker of the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, and prior to joining Ending Spending, Brian practiced law at the national litigation firm Boies, Schiller, and Flexner. Welcome, Brian. Do you find when you recommend broadcast TV that there is some anxiety on your side about you recommending broadcast TV, and with all of these digital opportunities out there and the ability to target digitally, is that, you know what, we're just not getting there?
You know, everybody loves to brag about the races they won. I'll tell you one we lost.
Right.
A race in Maryland where we were told by the Mayo consultant, don't buy broadcast. There's way too much waste in this district. You're buying Baltimore, and that's going to cover almost the entire state, and this congressional district is only a small part of it, and only 2 counties get Baltimore television. And all that is true, right? But the fact is, television is the single most impactful, most powerful way of talking to voters. And if you ignore people in those 2 counties, you're going to lose. And by ignore, I don't mean utterly ignore. I mean bombard them with mail, bombard them with radio, bombard them with social media, bombard them with digital, and ignore television. You will lose. You cannot ignore your voters wherever they are. And there's no easier, quicker, more impactful, more powerful way of reaching voters and moving voters and persuading voters than broadcast television, in a nutshell.
I couldn't agree more.
And the more data that's what I would challenge your constituents, your members, is to give us more data so we can better spend those resources. Otherwise, the folks saying don't do that will start to carry the day, and that's where it's a downside for everybody.
What do you see as the major drivers of political ad spending, and how have they changed over the last few election cycles?
I started making TV commercials in 1991. And between 1991 and 2010, it changed incrementally. 2010, when Citizens United was decided, the world changed. You used to be able to have control of a message, and by controlling the message, you would control the campaign.
Right.
And today, you don't have control. You as a candidate, you as a campaign, you as a candidate's media consultant don't have control of the message anymore. The super PACs have so much more money, and they end up controlling the message, especially as the stakes get higher. That is presidency, United States Senate, governor, top of the ticket type things. That's the biggest change.
That's the biggest change.
Yeah, you know, now instead of playing, people used to say, oh, campaigns are like a chess match. Now it's like asteroids. They're coming at you from all sides. You don't really know what to expect and when to expect it. It's completely different that way.
And you have that new thing called social media that's out there that's also changing the game in terms
another form.
Another voice in the marketplace.
Yes.
Brian, what have you seen?
Well, I think Dave is 100% correct. So I'm on the outside, and so your viewers and constituents know what that means. It means that I can't talk to, communicate, coordinate, do anything in concert with the campaigns that I'm trying to help, obviously, or the campaigns I'm trying to hurt in the case of working against Dave's clients. And so from the outside point of view, we're looking at what messages aren't being driven, what messages are being driven and need to be amplified. where people are advertising, where they're not, where there's holes, how to signal, if you will, like, hey, you should try this message, that kind of thing. So it's an incredibly complicated landscape, and through it all is trying to monitor what everybody's doing, both your friends, your allies, the campaign, and then the opposition. And so for me, the competitive landscape and monitoring that is maybe the most complicated thing I do running an outside group.
I mean, for a viewer out there, I mean, confusion, right? You could be hearing different messages that may be trying to push one candidate or one issue over another, but they may be going at it a different way.
And if you look at this presidential election cycle, there's a few candidates who have multiple PACs helping them, multiple outside groups helping them, and very little, it seems, discussion or coordination among the PACs, even though that's allowed on the outside. And they could be driving two totally different messages. Well, we think you should talk immigration, or we think you should talk crime. And all of it is drowning out the ability of the client to talk.
Right.
And of course,
Certainly the ability of the client to talk about what the client wants to talk about.
And this is a bipartisan problem. It is it's a bipartisan origins.
Do you see new media as additive or replacement traditional advertising on local broadcast TV? And how do you deal with new digital media? I mean, is it something that's put in a different silo? Do you look at it separately? How does it work to integrate all of your advertising together?
To me, I look at it as additive. I don't look at it as a replacement at all. And you're hard pressed to find anybody who's gotten elected to, say, the United States Congress on a digital platform primarily, right? There's nobody who goes, you know, I said I don't need broadcast, I don't even need cable, I'm going to put my money into social media and I'm going to win. Like that guy doesn't exist. That's the unicorn. It is at best additive. It is a supplement, it is a complement, and a worthy one. Like, you know, to take 5% of your traditional media budget and move it into social media, move it into a digital platform, use it as a way of communicating the ads that are on TV to people who happen to read the local paper. Like, sure, by all means, but keep it in perspective. It's 5%.
Right. Brian, do you see the same thing? I mean, for you, is it an or an and?
No, it's definitely an and, but I take a step back and I approach each question of how I spend resources with a single question, which is, what's my goal?
Right.
Right? Who am I trying to reach? If I'm trying to, say, reach the media, just as an example, to let them know about a particular fact or a particular ad campaign, or ask questions about this, or there's some new research or whatever, you might try Twitter, because reporters really are on Twitter. But if I'm trying to reach the masses and I'm trying to impact the outcome of something in a broad way, I go to broadcast media. And so that is still sort of the mother lode, the bread and butter, if you will. Those other things are additive and, frankly, probably slightly more targeted than traditional broadcast media.
Are you getting pressured to say, gee, you need to put X% of your dollars on digital?
Absolutely.
Are you hearing that?
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely.
No question.
When we started ending spending back in 2010, you know, people would say to me, you should, if you're going to do a media buy, a TV media buy, you should put 10% on digital. The other day, somebody said to me, you should put 30% on digital. They could say you could put peanut butter on digital. I mean, it doesn't, like, I don't know where they actually get those numbers, because, again, it's who are you trying to reach, with what message, for what purpose or goal.
Right.
And so I approach it from that, as opposed to just saying, the guy who says you need to put X% on this, I assume his kid needs braces. Like, that's my sort of general operating premise for whatever medium.
When you get that, when someone says, okay, Dave, we want to put 30% of our dollars on digital, what do you say?
I want to do the other side. I want to do the primary. I'll put my 95 on broadcast. You put your 30 on digital, and I'll win every time. That's what I say.
How do you differentiate? Gee, I'm going to put X% on local broadcast. I'm going to put so much on cable. I'm going to put so much on.
Well, I think you start with where Brian was, which is, what's your target? What are you trying to accomplish? What's your goal? And who are your targets in terms of how you achieve those goals? Right? And you let your targets drive your decision. One of the things that your viewers are going to be especially interested in is in primaries, especially the later ones, non-presidential, later in the year primaries. the electorate gets smaller, gets markedly smaller. And as electorates get smaller, they tend to get older. And of course, the people who watch broadcast in a disproportionate manner are older people. And so as the primaries, for people who are in the broadcast business, they see the presidentials in certain states as being cash cows, and they are, to be
Right.
sure. But there's an amazing opportunity to sell broadcast to people who are running, candidates who are running in relatively low turnout primary circumstances because the presidential's already over.
Sure.
Right? You look at New York, for example, where the presidential primaries early and then the congressional primaries in June. Right? That's going to be a low turnout primary. It's going to be a lot more older people who are participating. Those overlap really nicely with broadcast viewership. And so I would put in those instances more dollars on broadcast.
I like to make data-driven decisions. What Dave said about the electorate and where the electorate is so important. So, for example, in Republican primaries, everyone talks like, let's just advertise on Fox.
Right.
Right.
But Fox can be really overbought and really expensive.
Yes.
And so if you can have data back on where people are outside of Fox, but still voting in a Republican primary, I can't think of a show off the top. College football
Right.
is one example that would be on broadcast. I'd like to, and I love live sports as well, because people don't tend to DVR and so forth. So that's where I would be. But again, that would be in a Republican primary, which oftentimes my organization is trying to influence, versus when we move into the general election context.
What kind of big data do you look at? Do you use Rentrack data? Do you use Nielsen data? Do you look at set-top box data? Do you merge it with voter registration data? Is that happening? And by doing that, are you finding other areas that you might not have found before, like different types of programming? It's like, gee, that does really reach this voter segment.
Depending on the budget and the amount of money I'm going to invest in media, I would absolutely do that. So if I'm going to spend more than $1 million or several $1 million or more, definitely set-top box data, Rentrack, matching it into the voter file, attempting to really more precisely understand where the audience is and what they're watching. For a lower dollar, I tend to, wing it.
One of the things that TV stations have gotten really good at is narrowing the data. So instead of looking at a market, I can look at a county.
Right.
Instead of looking at a county, I can even look at a district. And oftentimes you'll see things in a county breakdown that you won't see in a market-wide breakdown. I'll give you a great example. In 2012, one of only 3 Democrats in the country to win a congressional seat in which President Obama's number began with a 3, in other words, was in the 30s, was my client, Mike McIntyre, in North Carolina. He won the closest House race in the whole country, won by 671 votes out of 338,000 cast, and was outspent by $1 million on the IE side. And one of the reasons we won is because we went in and looked county by county at every county in his district, and we noticed one county in particular is called Robeson County in southeastern North Carolina. And that is one of only 2 counties in the state that gets television out of Florence. And so the other side said, well, that's too much spill, there's too much waste, we're not going to buy Florence. Well, we looked at the county numbers, and we found that the CBS affiliate had a bureau in Lumberton, in Robeson County. And their news shares were around 47, 48, 49%, depending on the time of day. And so we bought those newses morning, noon, and night, saturation. And we took over 70% of the vote in that county. And when you win by 671 votes, like that was the difference between winning and losing. Because we really went into the data and got in on a county basis as opposed to a market basis.
We've just created, and we're coming out with it shortly, our political select database. So you'll be
Yes.
able to go into any congressional district and find out by county what households within what DMA are being reached, et cetera. So I think that's going to be very helpful.
And I've beta tested that.
Yes, you have.
And it's spectacular.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're excited about
Yeah,
it.
you ought to be.
With early voting, is that changing the dynamic in terms of when you start advertising? Are people going to start advertising a little bit earlier in the process than they have before?
I do think you will see the general election advertising move up. I found one of the things that was really strange last year, this is not about advertising, but the debates, the Commission on Presidential Debates, like the second and third debate or something were like after 10 million people had voted. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. It's like nobody updates the calendar. So hopefully this year we kind of learned from that a little bit.
The other piece of that is, as long as the super PACs are allowed to do what they're going to do, advertising is going to start earlier and earlier, in my opinion, because super PACs are funded by donors. And when you, as a super PAC, can go on TV early,
Right.
you can use your paid media to drive your free press, and that impresses your donors. So you'll see groups like, say, the League of Conservation Voters getting in and playing in June on television because they know that that ad in June is going to engender a story in Politico or The Hill or Roll Call or something like that. And they can use that story to drive their fundraising. If they wait until October, when everybody's on the air, nobody's writing about that story. Nobody's writing about that ad.
Where do you think, are the battleground states, you think, for the presidential election? Let's start there. You think it's going to be about the same? You think it's 8 to 12 and about the same states? You think there going to be some surprises there?
No, I think it's about the same.
Okay.
Maybe some people think New Mexico could be in play, depending on our nominee.
It does depend very much on who the nominees are.
Sure.
If the Republicans nominate somebody in the establishment, wing of the party, a Kasich, a Rubio, a Jeb Bush, a Chris Christie, somebody in that vein, then yes, then I don't think it's 8, but I think you're probably looking at somewhere in the 10 to 13 range.
Got it.
Of states.
So 10 to 13, okay.
Yeah, and the typical ones. I mean, you start with, the big four: Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, and Ohio. But Iowa, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, they're always going to be in there.
What can local broadcast, what can we do to help you? What would you like from us in terms of helping you in terms of doing your jobs?
For me, it's audience insights. So anything local broadcasters can do to, obviously help get data available for advertisers, for my media buying companies, for data analytics companies. To me, that's the key. Understanding where the audience is and what they're interested in.
Completely agree with that. In addition to that, I would say at the federal level, every local station has no choice but to make time available for federal candidates. But for state and local candidates, that's not always true. And I've done many down ballot statewide or even state Senate races where the local candidates are simply shut out. And providing access to candidates, even if it's at an extraordinarily high rate, providing access is important.
What about the ability for local stations to integrate their digital properties and their D2 stations with their obviously local broadcast inventory? How can that help you?
I don't want my 30-second spot just jammed into a pod, with 10 other spots. So I look for places where I can break out, even if it means a little bit non-traditional places to advertise. But I'd rather stand out than just be like political ad, back to show, political ad, because all of that is just white noise to the voter. So I'd either like to go, a little earlier in the process or in a non-traditional place.
Thanks again, and we appreciate your time.